Hello, welcome once again. Um, want to reflect once again, continue. Maybe like yesterday's video, I remember I sort of opened the door within myself. Some things connected there, and because I want to bring forth some of that insight, reflect a bit on this. For me, some things, some way I already touched on this in previous videos as well, but somehow it really felt like now making sense to me in a deeper level, and like, or the picture itself became more whole. What I'm talking about is this thing of the dreamer dreaming our reality. When I say it like that, it may be a bit fake, but we have actually been building some kind of logic, trying to make sense of how does that actually work. For me, it started to make a whole lot of sense when looking at all these torus fields, seeing that as our own field of information, our own field that we are generating, and I want to reflect on how this is actually shaping our reality. And this is actually then also how we have a way, how we can shape our reality. But really, the key is also, or the limitation is also, us becoming a conscious dreamer, a conscious being, learning to actually master our own field. So let's reflect a bit on this. Also, I came across some video a couple of days ago, and there it was about like Project Camelot, some kind of a disclosure or whatever, and this I think this was like a CIA whistleblower or something, but they were talking about some experiment they did where they had a mush of some berries or something, and really like in a mush state, and then they projected a hologram onto it. Use some kind of a setup that was projecting this image, this what you're doing here, this hologram, and within this holographic universe, I guess it is a field of information, it is a structure, it is light structured in a three-dimensional form, I guess. And then that experiment showed how this mush came to life, even though I didn't see that in the video. But either way, I feel there is a truth to this, and definitely feel um, this is connected with the structure of our universe itself. And like I just mentioned, we could call it a holographic universe, and from that sense also seeing our own field, even though we don't necessarily see it with our own eyes. But we do have this electromagnetic field, we do have this toroidal field that we generate, and our science is also already not not able to pick up the entire thing of it. We are limited in our own measuring, but either way, we do have a field. It also made me think about some experiments. Don't know the name of this, but it had to do with like this, the observer and the observed, and how the observer, when it is looking at it, it gives structure to this consciousness. And when we remove the observer, when no one is looking at it, then that consciousness collapses, the wave collapses in on itself. It returns to that state of pure consciousness. I like to call that the sea of consciousness. And then when we look at it, it's like, oh, the object is there again. It's also very funny to reflect a bit on this in our own life. Because, yeah, sure, all the things we see, it is already here. But is it here when I go away or look away? Certainly feels like we are actually the ones generating. Maybe want to make a distinction here already. Our own reality, surely also with our own projections. But there is also the shared, the real reality, which is also being generated. And I would also say a lot of this generating is happening unconsciously. Very similar to how we can have dreams, and in this dream state we have these experiences, and like we are not conscious that we are actually generating them, but at the same time we can also become conscious. The dreamer can become conscious, like lucid dreaming. I've certainly had these experiences while I'm dreaming, that it's like I feel something within me in that dream state, like a fear, and then suddenly that thing shows up. But then also, like, I recognize that pattern inside the dream itself, like I just generated this myself, didn't I? And it's actually, I think this is often a process where we first start to become conscious of this in the dream state, learning to master it there, and then further and further also becoming more aware of this in this level of reality. Now I feel like I've touched a lot there. Some imagery that has been going through my mind recently, past couple of days, is a distinction also in these terms of like video games and stuff like that. Connecting this also with how people nowadays may say or call this thing a game, or like call it a simulation. But I want to maybe use this imagery to try to make sense of something, even though it feels a bit weird. But either way, we could see this reality we are in as a sort of an open world game. These type of games where you have your character, yourself, I guess, and you run around in the world, you do stuff. And then there are these other people. It's there where really the distinction is. I'm making a distinction between a sort of a single player modus, the offline modus, and then a multiplayer one. It also feels a bit like a process, how we are actually maybe really truly living in a multiplayer one reality. What is the distinction that I'm seeing here? It is like in the single player, you still have these things running around, these people running around, but to you, they are NPCs, or these non-playable characters, or a bit like robots, and they do their thing, and it's in a way they follow a script. I touched on these earlier videos as well, and it feels like they are part of your story that you are experiencing in that life. And I feel this single player modus feels, to me, it connects a lot with how a lot of people are experiencing this life from a much more egoic consciousness. It has that feeling of a bit much more selfish. It's like me, I'm having my experience. But also here I'm connecting it with like, but these other players are also here. It is you who is projecting, and also connecting this with what we touched on earlier, other video, our own limited capacity to process what is going on in our reality. Also, our own sense of security. It can be like some people are afraid of these other people, or it makes them feel insecure. They want to have a script inside of their mind, and they're really playing the game from that perspective, where these other people in our life, in our experience, they are sort of, you are actually projecting in the single player egoic mode. You're projecting an image onto them in your own mind, even though I guess a lot of this happens unconsciously. We're not processing them as true living beings. Also because that there is no there is no processing power for that. It is also a very protective, defensive mode, often protecting maybe from, if you have played some kind of multiplayer games, a lot of fun things can happen with this. But the thing is, we all have played live, and someone in our life, some other person, we want to have control of them. Then we feel safe. But they can take something from you. They can maybe beat you up or whatever, or like say something that hurts you. And that's maybe why we want to actually create this kind of, oh, I want to play single player, and we create our own ego. Thing is, a lot of this happens unconsciously. Just trying to use these terms to maybe make more sense of it. Because this is not the real reality, even though you are having, it's like, I want to have a fun experience for myself or protect myself, so I will just pretend everyone is, or that I am offline. And that's interesting because through that experience you're actually disconnected with the true reality of what is going on. Again, it is, you're gripping onto life. It is disconnecting it with the true flow of life, with also these other people, the true people. We can shift this, we can actually come online ourselves, but for that we need a connection. And also the processing is different, I guess. It takes much more processing power to truly give also that freedom to these other players, these other people, these other beings. Animals can also be this, them making their own choices, doing their own things. And I feel this is much more true to our reality, where I also wanted to touch on this because, or maybe in like spiritual beliefs or something as well, people um, can take on beliefs that these people are NPCs or things like that. I feel like in some way that is dehumanizing as well. I feel we are much better off in actually acknowledging that every living being has some kind of life force that is moving through it. It has some kind of spirit or flow that is there, whether they're expressing it or really being really alive, or that's a different thing. But it's again this stable ground. We have to find a proper foundation that we always then from there can truly respect the other, also the animals. Everything in this experience is alive. Where am I going with this? So let's circle back a bit. This dreaming the dream, generating the reality ourselves, started to see this more clearly. In a way, I felt this for a long time, but Let's expand on this thing I touched with the observer and the observed, because I want to also look at those dynamics between that. The observer gives structure to the observed. And let's maybe firstly also recognize this is like an experimental state where somehow you create a vacuum or whatever, where you are the only observer that is there in that experiment. So when you look away, the whole thing collapses. But let's look at this reality. We're all observers, many observers. Now there is, or the way we observe, it connects with our own field. There also the observational power, we could call that maybe creational, generational, or generative power. There is a distinction in that, but what this also brings is that if I stop observing, the thing doesn't necessarily collapse to the pure sea of consciousness, because other observers may still be observing it. Now, I touched on differences, putting that in terms of our field. Touched on this earlier as well. Our field can become stable. I want to say aliveness. The flow of life is a variable thing. How much of life do we let flow through us? And through that are actually also generating life ourselves. I touched on this with this in a couple of videos ago, with how a lot of this egoic consciousness, they're gripping on life and then they have a kind of a drip. What they are actually generating, I want to connect that now with the stream that they are generating. The field they are generating is actually like a droplet compared to someone who is much more open to life, and through that actually also generating life, healed, a whole field. And this can also be really put in also like depending on all these layers inside the body and the chakras, and how many of them do we have open and actually truly stabilized and put all together. That is really what shapes our field, gives us that power, or the power, the life. It is life itself that is moving through us. But this is then giving someone who is much more open, is able to put or create a field that, or is a living field that is, compared to that droplet, it is a high pressure stream of life itself. And then you could say this one person has the same creational power than a lot, I don't want to quantify it in numbers necessarily, but a whole lot of these droplets. No need to say like this is better than that. It's really just power. It's a lot of projections are happening here, or are certainly possible. Like, you think you're better because I mean, there is no need for that, but just trying to explain here how the dynamics and how this whole reality is actually dreamt into existence, is actually being generated. And actually reflecting this all to ourselves, that if we realize this is how our reality is truly generated, well, this may give us inspiration to actually, we can become more influential by going through our healing journey, by stabilizing our own field, by becoming alive ourselves. Maybe an interesting thing saying this is, it brings me a thought of, why would we let the people who are dead inside decide what life, where life goes? And in some way, it's interesting because I feel our society is often doing exactly that. But also, our society is a whole bunch of people who are all very closed off to life, and then the whole mass is often then manipulated or brainwashed into creating a certain reality through these kind of mind control things or rituals, or even but a lot of this is happening unconsciously, but you can see it in like sport events or on television. It's full of it, and it's actually all combining or trying to guide these small droplets. The thing is, they do add up if you, but at the same time, we can take a whole lot of power ourselves through healing up, doing the real work. And you can also believe that you have opened up and have a strong field. Thing is, your energy doesn't lie. Let's just say it like that. Now, want to touch a bit on the dynamics between the observed and the observer as well. When we have a field that is alive and we are observing some other field, so earlier it gave me that feeling of we can actually help the whole field around us actually also come alive. It's like there is a Bible thing about Jesus, I guess, also, where Jesus, I think, finds maybe some kind of a dead bird or something, and he just talks to it and he blows life into it. It feels this is actually very connected with this. When we are in our true flow of unity and wholeness, we can actually bring our environment alive. There I also sense or feel a key in not forcing that. It's really giving them the freedom as well to come alive or not, or to step in more into that flow. And connect this maybe also with like, everyone is giving life, but how much life do we have within us? And again, this observer effect of the observer is giving structure to this, in some way also shaping life itself through that, but also a lot through that structure, through that field itself. If a lot of people are shaping it in some kind of distorted form, or let's just neutralize that a bit with our current reality is really reflecting our own state of being, but our own state of being is very variable on individual levels. But we have to also look at, well, this whole world, there is a whole mass who are creating this collective reality as well. They're also players, I guess, but we all can become a much more key player through going through that healing journey. And then we have more say in the game of life itself. But wanted to go deeper on this dynamic between observer and observed. How does it often or could be feeling when someone is observing us when we are actually the observed? That pressure we can feel of them projecting an image onto ourselves. It is that pressure which is trying to shape us into that form which matches the image. And there is also some order in that, where when we are more alive, more stable, more powerful in our own field, you are that high pressure stream of life itself. It is constantly flowing, life is through you, and then someone comes and projects this observer power with like a droplet onto your field. It won't add much pressure to that field. Trying to bring some light to these dynamics. Let's look at it the other way around. That's maybe also very connected with why I say this freedom is very important. You can certainly also dominate, and if you shoot your high pressure beam at like a droplet, then there won't be much left over. But that is also different than letting it come alive. You're really that's maybe the opposite, but it explains why when someone who is in that flow of aliveness, the other one, the observed, or the one that I am observing, can certainly experience a whole lot of pressure. It's also interesting in my own experience, I seem to connect with that and actually feel that, and then we can also adjust our own field and things like that, and play with it so it's not too much, but at the same time we want to stay alive ourselves. Feels that it's much more a connection. I also want to just get maybe to we can find a way in which we do this all peacefully, because certainly and truly, like, we cannot force that peace onto others. We can be ourselves, and within that ourselves stay peaceful ourselves, and understanding that even though we may be peaceful and loving, others might really. I was even connecting this earlier in my walk. Well, they might perceive this as you are warring against them. I was in my walk thinking about this thing of the Antichrist. Let's say let's put ourselves into or just there is a form of consciousness, could be a person or whatever. They have their current belief system, their current structure, and then someone with a different structure, maybe one who is actually much more alive, observes that structure, maybe even starts talking to it. Thing is, they could be open to this, actually let that life flow in, and actually them open themselves up to life in that way. Again, too much at once, we may explode, so there is a balance, but they can also remain closed off and see this energy, this interaction, as someone is threatening my own structure. Someone is putting pressure on this. And in their own belief, they might think they are Christ or believers of Christ or whatever. And really, you can generalize this to anything that threatens my structure must be evil. This is certainly a mindset a lot of people can have, and it's not necessarily true. It is in a way a self-defense mechanism, I guess, but what are we defending ourselves against? Let's just also again notice this ego is often actually defending ourselves against life itself and the unpredictability of life. So this can certainly, and I wouldn't be surprised if in our lives we're gonna see a lot of people who, when they are actually holding on to their consciousness form instead of opening up, then they may project all sorts of things. And in that perspective, it is certainly possible that someone who is actually being in a Christed energy, being in a structured energy through which life can actually properly flow, when they observe this or interact with this, that they might very well call that truly Christed thing the Antichrist. And I see that as a funny joke. Maybe also interpreting Antichrist as like, could be a projection, the one who is against my own order. And that's really then also coming from us holding on to our own order. Connecting this with earlier videos of, have we gone through this process of actually finding our own values and questioning this and finding truth, and through that it is really building some kind of order, also testing what is actually truly stable and what actually works or not. And let's recognize a lot of people in this world have not done this. So and then seeing when this environment, when this world is coming alive, I have a strong feeling it actually is. It certainly is within me. But then I also realize me just being me, it's making my environment more alive. Or they can remain closed off and then they start to, or want to do this to me. So that they don't, so that to protect their own the structure they are in, I guess. Also, I find a lot, just seeing how this is going on, I find we can be much more compassionate with everything that is going on and truly just keep loving everyone, even through all this chaos and whatnot or whatever, and remain clear within ourselves and what we are doing. Also within that also means always still questioning ourselves and questioning what is actually going on here. Why am I feeling this and what is? But I feel that is sufficient for today, so have a good one.